listening to Radio Sputnik. I'm Angela Davis. My guest today is Luigi Wewege, the author of The Digital Banking Revolution. He's also a FinTech speaker, technology enthusiast, and entrepreneur. So what are your thoughts on the current phase of development of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies? I mean, we had this huge price surge, a period of front page coverage where everybody was going crazy for Bitcoin and all the media was covering it, talking about it all the time. And then we had the crash, the correction, and nobody's talking about it like they were before. And, even though we had this recovery, and even if you look at the overall growth for, over the past year, it's quite good. It's excellent. It's better than almost any other investment that's legal. And what do you think is going on now? Have we entered a period of stagnancy or stagnation?
I consider cryptocurrencies in general, and Bitcoin in particular, still very much in the early stages of evolution. The first Bitcoin was mined only in January of 2009, and since then Bitcoin has been pronounced dead thousands of times. The current correction is just another market correction for what I see as a scarce virtual commodity, and one that is still primarily a risky investment, although beginning to become more mainstream in its adoption and use.
Do you think that the events of last year, beginning of this year, have sort of changed the market for Bitcoin and cryptocurrency? I mean, because before, first of all, we did have, the option to purchase futures, which appeared at the end of last year, and then again, all of this hype around it and the huge media coverage it got, and a lot of new investors, I think, a lot of newbies coming into the field.
Yeah, well, I see the current collapse of the value of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, I believe, is a shakeout of the market. Basically gained in value very rapidly over a short period. At the beginning of 2017, Bitcoin was worth around $800, and now it's hovering around $9,000. The big difference is that a large percentage of the population in countries that are buying Bitcoin have now heard about it, and a significant subset of their population has now invested in Bitcoin. The current shakeout will probably remove the casual investors, but leave the hardcore investors to continue. Having said that, Bitcoin, Ethereum, etc., I think will more than likely recover and go on to new highs later this year.
Right. Well, we're all hoping for that. And do you think that we've come any closer to some kind of mainstream adaptation?
Yeah, I mean, definitely mainstream awareness. There's a number of research reports now indicating that in some countries, over 60% of the population has heard of Bitcoin, although some of this data has indicated that this awareness is due to the context of money laundering and terrorism. Nevertheless, I do believe the percentage I just referenced will continue to rise as the use of cryptocurrencies become more relevant outside the investor realm, and in other words, for making payments for goods and services.
What do you think it's going to take to really make Bitcoin reach the mainstream? Of course, these crazy, price explosions, I guess you can say, mooning, as they call it in the crypto sphere, where you went to $20,000 so quickly. That, of course, was definitely, something that made the media attracted to it. And everybody was reporting on the Bitcoin. All the mainstream media, finance shows were also talking about the price of Bitcoin. That stopped very quickly. But, now we're back to the people who were, I think, investing in it for a long time, and perhaps some new traders who are looking at it just as something that can be traded like a commodity, and they're looking at futures. They're looking at, the normal pump and dump and hype cycles that you see on Wall Street, just like any other speculative thing that you can buy and sell, commodity that you can buy and sell. But do you think that before we see mainstream adoption, we will need the resolution of scaling issues with technology like the Lightning Network? Do you think we need government regulation? Will it be PR that will make it, mainstream? Or will Wall Street's interest and adaptation of it as a tradable commodity, as a speculative commodity that's interesting, make it mainstream? What's lacking right now? Is it just a matter of time, perhaps?
Sure, I think it's a number of those things. But, for cryptocurrencies, I believe to reach mainstream adoption, it will require four main points, I think, to be facilitated. And I consider these the first to be the increase in performance of the network. In other words, what you just alluded to regarding the resolution of scaling issues with technology. I think the second would be the standardization of its use and interoperability. And what I mean by this is for governments to start adopting blockchain technology for various operational uses. This will not only necessitate the development of standards, in other words, regulation, but it will assist in cryptocurrencies becoming widely used across financial systems. The next point, I believe, which needs to occur is the dramatic improvement in user-friendly access to cryptocurrencies. Presently, most average investors have expressed that they find the whole crypto space far too complex to navigate. And I think the last point needed for mainstream adoption will be, the increase of security at crypto exchanges. And this is to safeguard people's digital currency and wallets. I just want to make one last observation here about the regulation of cryptocurrencies, which I think is important to make. And that is, yes, I believe this will help in some respects of helping its mainstream adoption, but some may argue that this will just end up mirroring the current banking system, whereby a small portion of the world's population has access to it. And this ultimately going against the fundamental principle of creating cryptocurrencies for open source development.
Definitely. Well, how are we going to get out of that dilemma? I mean, it's kind of a dilemma or a paradox, and is there a way around it?
Sure. There's obviously as its usage increases, as I mentioned, the interoperability of cryptocurrencies, and that's when more organizations, Fortune 500 companies, start making use of it. It becomes more widely adopted by the general public.
So you think that blockchain technology becoming more mainstream is going to be what's going to help to drive, cryptocurrencies, which are on the blockchain, also into a more mainstream category?
Yeah, absolutely. And then people will start, instead of using fiat currencies, actually using it to make payments for goods and services, anything from paying their utility bill to paying for gas at the service station.
Okay, so now what do you think is going to happen, or what needs to happen with, not just the scalability and other issues that we talked about, the technical issues, but the fact that, you touched on this a bit, that it's quite difficult to navigate. It's in most countries, it's quite difficult to even buy cryptocurrency because you have to go from fiat currency into, a cryptocurrency. And in Russia, for instance, you have to go onto some kind of exchanges, and people were meeting with each other to exchange this in person and do these little transactions. And the rates are just crazy. It's like 10 and 15 and 20%. And people were losing so much money, And then we had the whole scandal with the BTCE. Now several countries or several banks have outlawed purchases of cryptocurrency with credit cards. What do you think needs to happen, and what do you see happening to facilitate people being able to buy cryptocurrency? Do you think that we'll have to wait until we get a trustless exchange that's on the blockchain?
For me, I think security certainly needs to be addressed in general, but in particular with crypto exchanges, as I mentioned before. One of the things I consider is the loss of keys to be an ongoing issue. But I actually believe there's a solution, such as the storing of this type of data on hardware, which is currently being developed. And this will actually allow for secured remote copy of the data to be recreated, this allowing a person to regain lost keys.
Which would be nice for many people who have thrown away their keys that were either in a paper wallet or even a hard wallet,
Absolutely. I once heard of an instance of a guy in the UK. He bought Bitcoin quite low, and it ended up being worth $700 million. And he discarded his laptop, which now sits in a dump somewhere in the United Kingdom, and he's trying to get access to the dump so as to go through all the trash to try and find his old laptop now.
Wow, yeah. You're listening to Radio Sputnik. I'm Angela Davis. My guest today is Luigi Wewege, the author of The Digital Banking Revolution, FinTech speaker, technology enthusiast, and entrepreneur. Let's talk about your book. Now, you write about the effects of the disruption that will be brought to the banking system by emergent financial technology businesses. Is blockchain and cryptocurrency one of those disruptors?
Yeah, absolutely. Cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin and Ethereum, they've become a major disruptive force in retail banking, financial service industry. And, this is due to them profoundly changing the way in which consumers spend, move, and manage their money, unlike ever before.
Right. So what other disruptors are there? I mean, because there's also the banks, who many banks are not happy about some kind of alternative to the banking system. Many central banks are probably not really happy about this either. And we've seen this, with attempts to sort of close down, in vain for the most part, but to close down mining or to close down trading or, exchanges and so forth. What other methods of disruption of the current banking system can we expect to see other than cryptocurrency?
At the moment, I consider several innovations actually threatening traditional retail banking. And the first of these is basically the removal of the traditional retail bank as the arbitrator or middleman in transactions. And this is through the increased use of smart contracts. Another is the recording of ownership in a means that cannot be changed by governments. And this will continue to encourage new investments and the release of pent-up value in certain jurisdictions around the world. And the last one I consider is, the role regarding of central banks. I believe that over time they'll become less about regulating transactions of actual money that we, as we know of. It would be more of trying to regulate these new financial service innovations that are coming to market.
Have there been any conventional bank innovations that you think are similar to what blockchain is, or is blockchain completely out of the world and cryptocurrency is just so much different than any other thing that we've seen? I mean, since ATMs, because ATMs at some point were quite, cutting edge.
Sure. I mean, when you say blockchain, it's actually distributed ledger technology. This is, I think, just all part of the evolution of modern finance. Every so often, there's always going to be some sort of level of innovation that takes banking and finance to the next level, and this is just the period that we're living through.
So what's going to happen when we all, start using Bitcoins? Are all the government banks going to be closed down? What's going to happen? Are normal retail banks also going to no longer be needed? Tell me about the evolution.
All right. Just a point on blockchain when it comes to government. Let me just answer that one first. I think the level of encryption will continue to improve as new computing power comes online, such as quantum computing. This type of sophisticated technology will likely be unhackable by governments as well as cyber criminals. It's actually quite interesting to note that the current encryption versions used outside of the USA are actually proving to be more secure than the ones used within the United States at present. This is actually due to the United States government banning the export of encryption technology in the late 70s, early 80s. And this basically sets in motion a movement worldwide to develop better encryption. As for the prediction of fiat currencies, I see it continuing to coexist in the financial system actually for many more years to come. You've got to consider that it took almost 40 years before the widespread adoption of credit cards. I will say that the paper money is most likely to disappear first. And you see this in Scandinavian countries who are currently the first jurisdictions setting this in motion. And I believe, within 5 years, almost all first world countries will be transacting completely digitally.
So you think we're actually going to stop printing paper money?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in certain, as I mentioned, certain Scandinavian countries have already taken it that far where almost all financial transactions now are done digitally.
What's going to happen there's so many countries around the world where they use the American dollar, like literally. And if the U.S. stops printing dollars, and these are countries that are developing, there's some countries in Africa, there is Panama, for instance. There's some other countries, that use American dollars as currency.
Sure. I don't ever see the U.S. dollar ever being replaced as kind of the de facto main currency of the world. I don't think it'll ever get to a point where they'll just stop printing it. It's just when it comes to transaction usages, people, instead of pulling out a couple of dollars to pay for their bread, they would actually just pull out their phone and just swipe that at the register. Right.
And I think China has come really a lot. I spent a year in China, and I can say that it's amazing that you don't use money for anything. It's, if you're sitting in a restaurant and you want to pay the bill and you're with a group of friends and you want to split it, one person will pay the bill and you just, go through your popular Chinese social media, which also allows you to buy tickets, order food, order housekeeping, order tickets to movie theaters, on trains, planes, buses, everything else. But you can also just send money to your friend, and the money is kept on the account. It's called WeChat, and everybody's using this. But the thing is that you can actually, if you go to your local little vegetable seller on the street, and there's no computers, a very primitive cash register, but they do have a little, special thing that you can scan and pay for your bunch of parsley. But what are the real ramifications of going to a cashless society when you have this, everywhere? What are the biggest problems you see with this?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a problem. I just see that retail banks becoming a lot smaller. over time and a lot more specialized. I also see banking continue to have less of a physical presence and will basically become about serving an aging portion of the population. This basically touches on your point where money, actual money, cash will no longer be the sole medium of exchange. And this is due to smart contracts enabling new and interesting approaches to completing a financial transaction. You've already seen this starting to appear with online games. And I think will continue to spread to the real world as the post-millennial generation enters the workforce.
Okay. What's going to come first? We're going to stop using cash, or are we going to have this all happen at the same time? We're just going to start using smart contracts and cryptology and blockchain, distributed ledger technology.
I don't see it like tomorrow everyone changes over. It's definitely a phasing that will take place in the market over the next 5 to 10 years. It's as people get more used to the idea of using cryptocurrencies to pay for certain things, that's when its mass adoption will really kick in.
Very, very briefly, can you tell us what we can already spend cryptocurrency on today? What can you do with cryptocurrency?
Well, and at the moment, it's more of an investor kind of play. But I mean, there are certain jurisdictions around the world where you can actually already pay for your bread, milk, and cheese. So it's generally moving in that direction where it's going to become an alternative form in which to pay for goods and services.
Okay, now some anarchists and libertarians foresee a huge market crash of major economies and currencies that will revolutionize the concept of money and everything that we have come to trust in. What do you think is going to be the method through which we see the mass evolution of modern finance and economies?
Well, Venezuela is a microcosm of what could happen, or should I say, if there's another market crash, even though cryptocurrency mining is illegal in Venezuela, there are a number of miners who are actually currently making enough to feed and support their families. Money as a concept, I think, will continue to change and evolve as cryptocurrencies become more widespread in their application. The revolution of modern finance and economies will happen, but is more likely to be a slow behind-the-scenes adoption of the technology than actually become an essential part of the economy. I see rather an all-out dramatic change that's predicated by a major market crash. Should there be a major market crash, though, I would say this would definitely speed up the process, but I believe that this will not entirely be essential to the mass evolution of modern finance taking place.
When do you think the big crash will come? Any ideas?
Any ideas? I think we're not far away from. I think the market's kind of we're at peak now. It's going to be downhill from here shortly, unfortunately.
Does that mean crypto is also going to go down?
I think crypto is actually correcting itself at the moment.
Yes, it is. Mm-hmm.
I meant more in regards to the stock market. I think crypto is currently going through a correction and will go up again very shortly.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Angela.
I'm Angela Davis, and you've been listening to my interview with Luigi Wewege, the author of The Digital Banking Revolution, FinTech speaker, technology enthusiast, and entrepreneur.